There are so many people who enjoy taking photographs these days, myself included. We're fortunate today to have as our guest a professional photographer and teacher. Stay tuned and find out what tips he can give to us on taking better pictures.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
Edmond Kwan had a career in high-tech as a product marketing manager for a number of years. During the high-tech meltdown in Silicon Valley in 2001, he decided to turn his love of photography into a new career as a freelance photographer. He also pursued a teaching credential, becoming a high school teacher in photography and multimedia design. Welcome, Edmond. It's so good to see you here today.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you for having me on the program.
What do you find is the most rewarding about being a photographer?
Well, Grace, life is full of moments. And, as a photographer, I feel great if, I'm there to capture that important moment. And let me give you some examples. I brought a couple of photographs. For one, if you remember the picture where the sailor, leaned over to kiss a nurse back in
Absolutely.
World War II,
right.
By the photographer Eisenstadt in the photograph. Actually, I believe it was on the cover of Life magazine. Mm-hmm. He was there for that moment. And the other photograph that gave me such inspiration is the Battle of Iwo Jima,
yes.
where the soldiers are holding up the flag.
Yes.
And again, that's a moment in time in our U.S. history that really became an icon. So it's capturing those moments, and as a photographer, you get to tell the story through those images.
Absolutely. But some people think that if you buy an expensive camera with all the bells and whistles on it, that they can take better photos. Is that true?
That is both true and false. It's true because I believe if you spend a lot of money to buy something that is built with great quality, you'll have great optical parts, the lenses and so forth, and certainly the sensor, the quality of the sensor will be able to capture and record the image better. However, even if you have a $2,000 camera in your hands, you still have to frame the picture and apply all the skills as a photographer. Otherwise, if you spend $1,000 on a camera, you just might end up with $1,000 worth of mess. So you still have to be that photographer. However, the camera technology is so advanced today that you could just buy any point-and-shoot camera, even the camera in your phone. They all take decent pictures now. So again, apply the photographic skills to it, good pictures will become great pictures.
So technology is on our side, huh?
It is certainly on our side. Just a quick comment to that. In the old days, when we used to have film camera, it takes a person much longer to learn photography because you have to go buy the film and get it developed and more money. But today, with digital photography, bits and bytes are practically free. You spend the money to buy the equipment, and you could learn very quickly. So certainly the learning curve shortens.
It's
so
shortened.
all of us could be good photographers in a hurry.
What are the characteristics of a good photographer?
Characteristics of a good photographer, you have to be at the right place at the right time for the right moment. I brought a couple of photos as well today, and one photo that I have is where the dancers are in the middle of a turn. And this photo, if you notice, all the faces are facing the camera. And as a photographer, you have to have that sense of anticipation when you're photographing action like this. You know when to click the shutter release so that the image is captured. So for this instance, the girls are turning, and I snapped the picture just fractions of a second before it actually happens. So as a result, all the faces are facing forward. The next photograph that I brought, this is a couple kissing in the middle of Pride and Prejudice, this really great play. And if you look at the photo, if the picture was taken a fraction of a second before or a fraction of a second after, you wouldn't have the same emotion that comes out of the picture. So it's the sense of anticipation, you know, the couple's going to kiss,
right.
but it's that split second moment that you get to capture. It's what makes it right. And another picture I brought today, it's just a use of a lot of resources that are in front of you. In this case, the model was, I used a mirror as another source to show the opposite side of her face. So there are a lot of those opportunities out there, and you know, a good photographer should be able to know their environment, know what's available to them. And lastly, if you're in the event photography, it's good to be inconspicuous, because people tend to act up or act differently if they know that there's a camera
Right,
pointing at them.
right, absolutely.
So if you're just kind of in the background, you probably tend to get the more genuine expressions to your images.
So who have been some of your customers as a photographer?
I've been photographing for many local theater companies, such as West Valley Light Opera, South Bay Musical Theater. I do publicity photos for them and production photos for them. What that means is you either stage or photograph a performance so that they could use the images to advertise their shows in the newspapers and websites and so forth. I've also photographed for a renowned chef where the food, it's for advertising. If you think about it, when we go to, you know, a restaurant, sometimes the restaurants will have pictures of the food.
Right.
So the chef has hired me to photograph her food so that she could advertise, you know, her restaurant. And I've photographed items and products for companies, executive photos for American Cancer Society I've done recently. So just a variety of clients.
Now, you've also been teaching high school for a number of years now, right?
Yes.
And what do you find rewarding about teaching high school, since it's such a different environment than the high-tech environment that you came from?
High school teaching is great. I like seeing progress, you know, in the students. A lot of times when they come into the high school as a freshman, they're shy. They're really timid about things. They don't take risk. And as a teacher, even throughout the school year, you get to see a child grow from, again, someone that might be shy to someone that might be able to do a really great presentation at the end of the school year. And that's really rewarding. And of course, if they move on and go to college and see them succeed, and as a teacher, I always see my success in the results of the student. You know, if they moved on to greater and better things, I really feel like maybe perhaps I've done a fairly good job in leading them there.
Right.
But just hope to inspire students to pursue whatever it is they want to pursue, and whatever success they can get along the way.
So you have no regrets about changing careers into teaching?
I don't. I probably retire as a teacher or educator of some sort. I've had my high-tech career, and not exactly say it's behind me. You know, if one of my former students come back years later and say, hey, Mr. Kwan, I've started this company and would like you to be one of our consultants or an advisor, certainly, I would give it some thought.
So now you've been teaching photography and multimedia design for the last couple of years in school. What are some of the assignments that you give to your students?
Oh, my photography curriculum, I focus in three main areas. First, artistic photography. These are beautiful landscape, macro photographs that you could use as postcards. You frame them into pictures and so on. I also teach them commercial photography, because when you buy a product today, like a printer, there's a picture on the box,
Right.
and someone has to take that picture. So that my students will see some commercial value to what they do. And third, photojournalism, in which goes back to the beginning of this interview, where it's just capturing the moment, whether it's sports, an event, a parade, whatever it is those special moments in life that that's deserving of being viewed over and over again. And some of the assignments, I get the students to photograph food. Again, I always say, hey, if you go to a restaurant, you get to see the food on the menu, so you get to learn how to do that. So they get to photograph food. And then I use Photoshop, since I'm teaching a digital photography class, I use Photoshop as a post-processing tool.
Now, I've heard that Photoshop is difficult to use. Is that right?
Well, if you look at photography, they're probably no more difficult than learning how to process something in a darkroom, working with chemicals and enlarger. But Photoshop, the program is designed with a lot of those things in mind. So today, so many kids are technology savvy that learning Photoshop or getting comfortable with it is not that difficult. So through Photoshop, they get to work with a lot of special effects, photography image effects, such as partial desaturation. I brought a couple of pictures here where the photos are black and white.
Yes.
And you get to pick whichever color
Right.
That enhances the photo and just highlight those colors. So it really gives it a kind of a classic, but also an artistic effect to the
I
to the
love
picture.
that effect. I love your photo of, the model, but she has these bright red lips and also red fingernails.
Yes.
So that, I think that photo is very striking.
Oh, thank you. Another effect that I enjoy are the long exposure. You see posters and pictures where you have the streak of lights.
The streak of lights, right,
from
right.
the cars.
Right.
So I have my students do that. Some students would go out in the middle of an intersection at night and set it on a tripod and try to get the streaks of lights. And other students who may not have the opportunity to photograph cars going by, in my classroom, I give them flashlights in a dark room, and they would write a message using the light.
Oh, really?
So through the long exposure,
Yeah.
you actually see a dark background and see maybe their name written, and they draw funny faces and smiley faces.
Oh,
So
that
we
sounds
have
like fun. Since we have you here as a captive guest, I'm going to have to ask you to give us some tips on taking better photographs.
Okay.
Now, one of the problems I've personally had was taking pictures of people in bright sunlight. Those kind of pictures usually don't come out well for me. What can we do to take better pictures in bright sunlight?
Well, it's interesting because a number of times I see people at any given event, they say, "Oh, it's nice and beautiful outside. Let's take some pictures. We'll take some really great pictures." But what they don't really quite understand is overcast skies produce the best pictures, mostly because it gives a more even lighting to it. However, if you are at Disneyland and you want to take pictures and it's really bright outside, the best is look where the sun is, know where the lighting source is. The brighter the sun, the more shadows you're going to have.
Right.
So, for example, if the sun is right here, you're going to see the shadow of the nose on the side of the face and the shadow of my chin on my shoulder. So, if that's a picture that that you're comfortable with, it's fine. But if you want to give it a little bit more as a photographer, you could certainly use a fill flash.
Fill flash.
Yes, that is, even as bright sunlight, you're still using a flash. So what a fill flash does is when you take the picture, it will light up the dark areas. I can tell you, there's probably no flash out there that could, compete
Right,
with the sun.
right.
But with the fill flash, you get to, again, fill those darker areas so that when you have a shadow on your face, it's not as intense.
Right.
The contrast isn't there. And that's why a lot of photography, you see a glow on the hair. It's when the sun, the lighting source, is somewhat above or behind the person, but the front of the face is a little bit darker. So when you use a fill flash, it fills the lighting in front of the face, and the natural sun will provide the glow around the head. And the effect that you find on the photograph is the image, the person is actually looks almost three-dimensional, where they look like they're lifted away from the background.
Tell me a little bit more about reflectors.
When you go on the camera set, you see people holding this big round
Right.
silver thing,
Right.
and what those are reflective. You're reflecting light. So going back to the last question about bright sunlight, one way to work with that, if for some reason you don't have a flash, is to use natural reflector. Buildings, white T-shirts. For many photo shoots, I actually wore a white T-shirt because I make myself a reflector.
Oh, so you as the photographer
Yes,
is wearing white
because the
T-shirt.
sun will hit my white T-shirt and cast a lighting source onto the subject.
Really? It makes that much difference?
It does make a difference. In fact, it casts a really nice soft light onto the subject.
Wow.
There's a lot of natural reflectors. So if you go to a park, for example, you could use the sandbox, because sand reflects light. I use sidewalks all the time, certainly buildings that are white around. So you can actually place a person in the shade that looks sort of dark, but through the reflection of these natural reflectors will give you a nice source of light.
I've also heard that, people who are taking family photos, or with a group of people, that wearing white is not necessarily a good idea. Why is that?
First of all, it's interesting. Every time I do a family photo, they tend to wear white. Because I guess it's a nice pure color for everybody, and
right.
everybody has white.
Right.
Unfortunately, camera equipment, both video and still photo, they capture light, and when you're wearing white, you're giving the camera too much light, or you throw the camera off in terms of what it's trying to adjust to. So most likely it would work with the white clothing that you have on, and as a result, the contrast with the face is too great. So your face will become darker.
I see.
And if you try to meter to the face, then the white clothing becomes overexposed. So it's just a lot more difficult for the camera to balance, between light and dark if you're wearing white. That's why even in television, the broadcasters, there's a lot of time their shirts are not, they look white on the set,
right. But they're
it's
not really.
They're not really white. They're slightly gray or slightly blue,
Oh,
just
I
to
see.
take that edge off of the,
I see.
the intense
Yeah.
white, bright image.
What is the best time of day to take outdoor pictures?
Yes, there's a difference, and I brought a couple of photos to show you. First, the one with the boat in the morning time, in AM, and when you take pictures in the morning, the sun is a little bit less intense, so the result of the photo will have a little bit less red, a little bit more blue. However, if you wait in the afternoon to take a picture, the afternoon sun tends to be warmer, and it would cast a lot more red in your image. So that's why if you take a picture of one scene once in the morning, of course the sun positions in the opposite side, and once in the afternoon, you're going to notice that the afternoon shot will have a little bit more of a red tint than the morning shot.
Oh, I see.
So it's all a matter of preference. There's no right or wrong answers.
Going back to taking pictures of people again, why is the position of the photographer important?
Just in general, I think that where photographer and the camera position is important. For example, one of the photos I have here with the basketball player, the intention is to get the action, and so it looks like something that belongs in Sports Illustrated or ESPN magazine.
Right.
You want to capture the expression, the emotion, and the action at the same time. Well, the optimum angle for me to do that is up high. So at this particular gymnasium, that happens to be a second floor that allowed me to do that. So angle will make a difference in terms of setting the mood for the shot. The second shot here that I brought is a stage scene of Don Quixote in Man of La Mancha. I wanted the characters to line up in the shot because this is the final scene where he's going to the Inquisition. So the soldier up top is saying, "Hey, Don Quixote, you're coming with me." So if I would have stepped to the left, to right a little bit, they wouldn't line up, and the intensity of that scene wouldn't be as intense. So that's why I did. So these angles really make a huge difference in terms of what you want the result. Another thing is, knowing where to stand and the angle you shot, you could help yourself frame the shot. For example, this photo of San Francisco that I took, I saw the reflections of the Christmas lights on the window looking out to San Francisco, and I positioned myself so that it looks like I photoshopped in these lights, but in reality it's actually what it is. It's just a matter of being in the right position. And in portraits, as you mentioned earlier here, positioning is also important because it really depends on what angle of the face you want. And here's a little trick. As a photographer of portraits, I always ask my clients to lower the chin a little bit.
Oh.
And what that will do is that you get the nice angle of the chin.
Oh.
And but people tend to look up when they're looking at a camera, and what that does in a portrait is that now my face is more square shape as a result. So
I see.
the people that are conscious about want to look thin on the picture, just have them lean forward and look down a little bit will probably give you great results.
Oh, lose 5 pounds or 10 pounds. Huh?
It can happen.
Now, I've heard of the term ISO. Explain to me exactly what that is.
Back in the film days, we used to buy different films, and films come in different film speed, they call it. Normally, I think you could go to Walgreens and buy a 100-speed film and 200, and then if you're photographing action shot, you move to 400. So this is the speed of the film, and what that is it's the coating on the film that makes it sensitive to light. So basically, any little speck of light that you have on the subject will show up. Well, on the digital side, they call it the ISO speed, and it works the same way. It's now, instead of working with film, it's the sensor in back of the camera, and that setting determines how sensitive that sensor is to light. So if you have a really high ISO setting, let's say in 1000 or 1600, it's like the film speed if you put in a roll of 1,000 speed film.
I see.
So it's very sensitive to light. So even you have a really small piece of lint on your clothing, it will be captured.
Oh, I see.
So that's what that is. And there's some trade-offs to that. The higher the ISO, you could take pictures in lower lighting, but at the same time, it will give you image noise. On the film side, we used to call it's grainy.
I see. Yeah, right.
Remember those days
right.
where the 400 speed film and sometimes 1,000 speed film, you look at the actual picture,
right.
It's like, wow, this is really grainy.
Right.
And the same happens on the digital side, and we call those noise. And what it is if you remember in the old days, as a kid, when you're doing art, if you want something to look lighter, what do? You put in white dots or black dots, right? So on the digital side, what the camera is doing actually is putting some of the extra white dot, gray dots, and red dots to make what is black a little bit lighter.
I
So
see.
that's why when you zoom in on Photoshop, you know, you see these little dots and you go, ooh, this just looks strange. But that's what it is. It's just making somewhat of an artificial light just so that
Oh,
your
I
eyes see it as, oh, it's brighter.
Let me just ask you one last question.
Okay.
How do we make better close-ups, the macro photos?
The close-up, you know, like it's in your eyes and it's in your creativity, what you want to get out of a close-up. Close-up, you know, is up to interpretation. You could have a close-up where it's a close-up of a flower, close-up of a bird, close-up of food, close-up of a squirrel, what have you. And I think the best macros are ones that are so close that you could barely tell what it is, because it captures your attention. Because when people look at a close-up, they tend to try to figure out what it is. And when they do, they get this warm and fuzzy feeling that, hey, I figured it out. But a close-up, it's the good close-ups, you know, are created by nice camera lens. That's why some camera lenses have a macro setting. And what that is it shortens the distance, the focus distance. Every lens has a minimum focus distance. It could be 5 feet away, so anything closer than 5 feet, it would have trouble focusing. So if your camera or the lens has a short focus distance, you should be able to take better macro pictures, which is close-ups, because you could either zoom in a lot, or you could bring the camera closer to the subject to capture that picture. I am a huge fan of macro photos.
Well, thank you so much for giving us all these very useful tips today. And I think we should end our program by showing some of your favorite photographs. Let's take a look at them now.
Sure.